Perfect. Thank you very much for joining our sixth webinar session. This one is about managing stress by identifying triggers and learning to respond rather than react. My name is Izabela Jucha, and as part of Fanshawe Corporate Training Solutions, I will be moderating this session. So just a quick note, once again, this session will be recorded, so please be aware of it. If you have your camera on, make sure to turn it off if you don't want your video to be shared for the social media later on. For those that don't know Fanshawe CTS, we are here to help with your growth. We do everything to make our clients better. And since all the pandemic situation, we're trying to go above and beyond to help with whatever is on the market through face-to-face, moving all those options to virtual training deliveries. And we're just trying to enhancing the communities, employers, and individuals. We basically value working with businesses, community partners, and amazing facilitators like Mohamed that we have with us today. Thank you very much, Mohamed. So
thank you.
Give me just one more minute to introduce you, Mohamed, and then I will pass it over to you. Mohamed Hammoud is a dedicated and driven community leader who believes that diversity is a fact and inclusion is a choice. That's a beautiful quote, isn't it? This is why he strives to break down taboos and misconceptions by using emotional intelligence to shift the landscape and create a positive impact. Mohamed, as an executive with a London-based tech company and a private consultant in a leadership development, diversity and inclusion, he is a multilingual facilitator, an engaging keynote and TEDx speaker. Oh my gosh, well done. Media commentator and community activist. So today, not holding you any longer, thank you very much for being with us. And over to you, Mohamed. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Izabela, and everyone for attending with us today. I'm really excited to spend the next 35 to 45 minutes to be of service to you and to talk about how we can be more intentional about being aware of how we manage our stress, especially given what we are all going through right now. This is a time when we have to be really aware that the landscape is changing and we're hopefully building a new normal. We don't want to go back to the old way of doing things, and definitely moving forward, we want to think, how can we gather that sense of wellness and well-being? And this is hopefully what we're going to talk about today. Our topic is around respond or react, and it's being able to increase our level of emotional intelligence so that we could create better relationships with people. We can be more fulfilled as individuals, and overall, we can find a certain amount of calm to help us get our work done, do what we need to with our partners, our business partners, our family partners, and just be overall healthy and happy. During this session, Izabela is going to be having access to chat. So if you want to chat, if you've got something to share, if you've got a hot question you'd like to ask, please do that in the chat session. Izabela will alert me that you want to share something. I want to be here to make sure that you're part of this session. I'm the guide on the side, so I'm only going to be sharing some knowledge that I think you already know, and we're going to think together how we can better manage our stress to be healthier and happier people. So moving forward, what can we look at today? So we talked about learning to respond instead of react. We're going to learn about our triggers. What is a trigger? How can we learn to be intentional and be proactive? And then how do we develop healthy habits? How do we turn, this isn't about a one-time event, you attending this webinar. This is an ongoing process about recognizing how we do things and how we can do them better. So hopefully today, your takeaway will allow you to just leave this session and think, did I learn one thing? Did I learn how to be more interactive and more in reflective of how I do things, of how I behave? And if we can change our behavior, we can learn to become better individuals. So let's start off by asking you, have you ever experienced stress at work? Please share in the chat session. I'm sure many of you are going to put yes in the chat session. And how many of you, I know we're all physically home right now, but when you turn off your computer, if you turn off your computer, how many of you walk away from your computer and take that stress to your partner or to your family? Probably quite a few of us, eh, Izabela?
I already see many yeses, yes.
Yeah. All right. So how do you experience the stress, and what exactly is stress? So I'm going to ask people in the chat again, if you could share with us, what do you believe stress is? So just put your ideas and share with us, what do you think stress is?
So just waiting for some comments coming back. So
Sure.
just give us about a few seconds and still waiting for some comments. I guess I can just say from my point of view, we have feeling anxious, can't concentrate, unsolved problems. That's also part of stress. Lack of control over situations. That's a very good one as well.
And so how many of you have ever gotten on a stage to sing a song or to perform or to act? If you remember when you were in high school, maybe you got to be in a high school operetta, right? Whenever we feel that we have to present in front of people, we get these butterflies in our stomach and we get a little nervous. Having those butterflies is good. A little bit of stress can actually be a good thing. So long as we can manage stress, it's not necessarily detrimental. It's only when you have a colony of butterflies in your stomach that you're getting really, really nervous. You know, you stop thinking properly. You become overwhelmed. That's when stress becomes unmanageable. And if you look at stress, if we keep it simple, think of stress as your internal reaction to what's going on at the outside. So it's just how your body and your mind reacts to what is happening in the world around you. Often, the way we react is indicative of these triggers that we're going to talk about in a minute, something that just sets it off for us and we behave in a certain way. Let's watch a quick video to help us understand what stress is all about.
Mohammed, the voice is just coming weird on it. Can hear it.
Sorry, come again?
The voice is very tricky to hear it now. I'm not sure what happened. We've tested it before. I'm sorry.
Oh, so you can't hear it at all?
No, and I have some comments coming up as well that they can't hear it.
Okay, so I wonder, that's what I was saying. I wonder if there's something you have to change in the Zoom settings when we're sharing. Let me try again. Nothing yet?
Try to put a play button because it's on the pause.
Okay. Still nothing?
Yeah, it's very blurry. We can maybe just go to the next one.
Yeah,
Sorry
not a problem.
that.
I can explain. So basically what we learned in this video, what the video shares with us, is how do we describe stress? What are the different things in the environment? If our reaction to what happens on the outside, how do we relate, how do we react to it on the inside? And what I want you to think about right now is, how do you define reacting versus responding? So in the chat, I'm going to ask you to give me examples of how you react versus respond. What are some examples of reacting versus responding?
Just waiting for some comments to come through. Immediate reaction, right away, not thinking and doing, responding takes time. Sleepfulness, sorry for that.
Okay. So it's your reacting. Somebody was saying that it's your immediate response. That is bang on. So when we react, we are being impulsive. We are not pausing. We are not looking at how we can better respond to the environment around us. So we receive a stimulus from the environment, and our initial reaction is to react. Versus when we respond, we learn to pause. We learn to reflect on what is the right form of action, and how we proceed is our response. The more that we are able to increase our responsive behavior versus our reactive behavior, we will build our self-awareness. We will build our ability to regulate our moods. And in fact, what you're doing is increasing your emotional intelligence. Let me ask right now, I've used the phrase emotional intelligence a couple of times. I'm making the assumption that everybody on here understands what we mean by emotional intelligence. Can I ask a few people to share what they understand by emotional intelligence? Again, in the chat, if you could share with us, and Izabela, if you could share with us some of our participants' input, what they understand by emotional intelligence.
Of course, just waiting for some comments to come through. Thank you very much for the participation anyway. It's very beneficial to actually have an interactive session with you guys in such way.
So emotional intelligence versus our IQ, so our EQ versus our IQ, our intelligence. Emotional intelligence has to do with our heart. It has to do with our personality and how we behave based on our self-awareness and our awareness of others, whereas our intelligent quota is how smart we are. It's how we behave. Now, even Einstein would say that our emotional intelligence is more important than our intelligence up here. If you think about having a diamond in your hand, it could be a diamond or a coal, and it doesn't matter to anyone. It's only when you share that knowledge that it becomes worthy to somebody else. And your intelligence, if you're not able to share it with other people using your emotional intelligence, it's not going to be useful to yourself or to anybody. So in a nutshell, think of your emotional intelligence as your self-awareness, awareness of others, and using that information to help you build effective and strong relationships with others. Now, how can emotional intelligence help us manage stress? Well, let's look at some stressful situations. So I'm going to ask everyone right now, if you've got a piece of paper and a pen, could you write down the most stressful situation that you've ever encountered at work? So you're not putting this in the chat. This is for your own reflection right now. Just take about 30 seconds and write down what is the most stressful situation that you've ever experienced at work. So hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to it, and we're even going to see if there are some brave people who will share with us a little later. So what happens when we react to stressful situations? Think about it. You say something that you don't mean, you get upset. There's a lack of proper communication. There's a breakdown of communication. When communication breaks down, that impacts the relationships that you have with others. It has a negative input on how you behave, on how you work with your colleagues. Think about it at home. A lot of us think that the people that we are at home is very different than the people that we are at work, when in fact, we just put on different masks or different hats and we play different roles. But who we are, the people that show up at work are really the people that we are at home. So the impact of negative relationships and miscommunication at work can also negatively impact your relationship at home. When you have an ability, when you are reacting to stressful situations, you also get in the situation where you have lack of trust with the people that you work with. If you're miscommunicating with them, if you're not having strong relationships, what ends up happening is you lose trust. And when you have no trust with the people you work with, the work that you're doing has negative results as well. It takes you longer to get the work done. It costs more time. It costs more money. You have the meeting after the meeting to actually get things done. Productivity goes down. And then you miss the opportunity to create those coaching and mentoring situations with the people that you work with. So when we react, these are all the taxes that we're actually paying because we are reacting rather than responding. What can we do differently? We can start identifying our triggers. So I'm going to ask you right now to just take a moment and to think about a trigger. Now, you'll probably wonder what a trigger is. And what I'll ask you to think about, hopefully not any of us have experienced anything traumatic in our life, but I want you to think of, was there anything that you experienced, a car accident, maybe the death of somebody in your family or a good friend of yours, or maybe a breakup of a relationship. I want you to think about that particular situation. What happens on the anniversary date of that situation? What happens when you get a reminder of the day that you broke up with someone, or somebody broke up with you? This is all painful, of course, but that's how triggers work. It could be a smell. It could be a song that you hear when you're sitting in a restaurant and you think about that relationship. These triggers impact us. But now the way we behave with these triggers, by recognizing what we control and what we don't control, allows us to move from reaction to response. How do we do that? First of all, I want you to think about these triggers we were just talking about. What are your triggers? Take 30 seconds and write down your triggers on the piece of paper that you have before you. How did you behave to that particular trigger? So you're sitting in a restaurant, your favorite song comes on, you realize, wait a minute, this favorite song was my favorite song when I was with so-and-so, and I'm no longer with them. What happens when you hear that song? How does it make you feel? I'm gonna ask some people maybe to share some examples. Now, you don't have to get too personal. I'll ask anyone who feels comfortable going out of their comfort zone. How does it make you feel? Would love to hear from some of you. Maybe Izabela, you can share with us what our participants are sharing.
We have some comments coming up now. One is very sad, feeling sad when those triggers coming up. Ani? Yeah, that's quite common response, feeling sad, being aware of those things around.
Now, what happens after a while, each time you hear that song, you're going to behave in the same way. And this becomes a habit. A lot of the time, we don't even recognize these triggers. You're walking down the aisle at your Walmart, you hear the song over the intercom. You don't realize it's even impacting you, but now you start reacting as if this was, in fact, causing you to behave in a certain way. After a while, you walk around like a time bomb because you've got all this pressure inside of you and you don't recognize what it is that is causing you to behave in such a way. And this becomes a negatively learned response that time after time, by reacting to the situation, we start behaving negatively. We start becoming less healthy. We become less happy. We become, as some of our participants are saying, we become sad. And this can actually lead into depression and clinical depression as well. So what is a trigger and how can we manage our triggers? Think of a trigger as a negative emotional response. Think of it as your fight or flight. So our great ancestors, if I was a cave person and I was hunting and I see a saber-toothed tiger, what's the first thing that I'm gonna do? I'm either gonna run or I'm gonna grab my club and I'm gonna hit the saber-toothed tiger, right? I'm gonna react. So it's either fight or flight. Now today, there aren't any saber-toothed tigers, right? And I don't think we're running into any lions or tigers anywhere at all in our workplaces. But sometimes it does feel like we're dealing with people that cause us to behave as if we were facing a saber-toothed tiger, right? I want you to think about a situation at work where you feel threatened, where you feel like you either have to confront the situation and you're going to react impulsively, or you're going to walk away and feel defeated. Take a moment right now and assess how that makes you feel. That's your trigger right there. Your trigger is going to bring back some negative memory of the trauma or how you behaved. And now it's going to elicit the same sort of reaction time after time after time. As we said earlier, it becomes a negative learned response. It becomes a bad habit. For example, if some of us have a bad day, maybe we go and we have a smoke, or we go and we have a drink, right? Now, if we learn that we can no longer control the situation, then we can no longer control the way that we're reacting to that situation. So we start forming habits that become crutches to help us react to the negative situation. Now you're not only dealing with the negative situation, you're dealing with the compounded problem that your reaction is bringing about. Over time, this has emotional symptoms. You start panicking, you feel discouraged, despair. Your inner critic starts talking and talking, and you don't stop talking, right? So think about a lot of the time when you're feeling overwhelmed, what happens? Your inner voice starts telling you what you're doing wrong. It doesn't necessarily tell you what you should have done better. It starts telling you you're no good. It starts telling you that you don't have good, you're not a strong person. You don't have good habits. It tells you that maybe you don't have good skills. Your feeling and your self-worth is devaluated. This is what negative stress can do to us, and this is what reacting rather than responding will end up doing to us over time. Of course, this is all personal. We may be sitting in a webinar like this, or in a restaurant, or at work, and nobody can see this, but it's all building up on the inside. And people will behave differently. Some people, when they're in this situation, may react and do something that lets the other people know what they're going through. Others will internalize it. So depending on your personality, you will behave in a certain way. How do you learn to manage these triggers and to do something different? So the way that we do that is by first identifying your trigger. So what I'm going to ask you to do here is to think about that stressful situation. And I want you to think about what is a trigger that causes you to remember the stressful situation. How do you react to that situation? Take a moment and let's walk through this together. So you've got that stressful situation I asked you to think about earlier. How do you behave when you are triggered? How do you react? When you're in the midst of that situation, do you consider what other people around you are going through, or do you internalize it and just worry about yourself? Do you understand the emotions that you're going through at that particular time? Now, here's the thing. When you get triggered, you're going to continue feeling these emotions later. You hear that song and you're with a different group of people later, you're going to feel those emotions. And if you're not aware of your trigger, you're going to be behaving negatively to that situation, and you're not going to be able to control it. So let's do an activity together. I'm going to ask you, building on that situation, how does it affect you? take a moment now, and I'm going to ask some people to share with us. How does it affect you? How do you react? How do you behave in that particular situation? What is the trigger that causes you to react in such a way? And ask yourself, is there a way that I can do things better? So can we get some people to share with us? And I'm going to be brave here, Izabela. I think we have the opportunity to unmute some people. If anyone is willing to share, maybe we can bring them off the mute and ask them just to share their story. And just a reminder, we are recording this session, so if you're not comfortable, you don't have to, but I can certainly share if there's nobody there to share with us.
That's a very good point, Mohammed. Thank you. I have some comments coming here. When I need to fire someone quits, heavy here. So some of those comments here. But if anyone wants to actually share comments with us, you can unmute yourself and please do so. Don't be that brave one.
So that person who's asking about, in a situation where maybe they have to fire somebody, right? That's the situation. Let's look at this most stressful situation. How did it affect them?
We have some right? Comments coming here. It's like being angry, feeling the anxiety and stress overall inside the body as well.
And it may have nothing to do with the person that you're firing. But if you're getting triggered from a previous situation, if you're, let's say in HR, if you're a functional manager, and this is something that you have to do regularly. I know some businesses right now have had to do RIFs. They've had to do a reduction in their workforces, right? Those people are going from one person to another and maybe giving them bad news. How is their level of stress being impacted? How is it impacting their job and what they're doing? How is it impacting the person that they're giving the message to? So those are all very real examples that we're all going through right now. So what we can do for this particular activity, because it is a very personal one, is I'll ask you to turn it into a personal exercise after this webinar and to really challenge yourself to come back to that stressful situation or situations, there may be more than one, and ask yourself, what did I feel? What emotions did I experience? How did I react to it? How can I identify what my triggers were? Is there a particular event that causes you to behave in a certain way? And then pause and ask yourself, if this is how I behaved and reacted, if I responded, how different would that look? If I took the time to pause and think about what I am doing and the negative effect that it would have on me and the people around me, by responding, how can I do things differently? So this is a great activity that you can do daily if there's something that is triggering you and causing you to feel stressed out. Identify what it is, name your stressor, how did you behave, and ask yourself, how could I do something differently? And a little later, we're going to figure out how we can turn that behavior into a habit so that we can actually learn to move on and get better and increase our emotional intelligence. I'm going to pause here and just ask if anyone has any questions so far.
I just have a really good comment here from Marty. When firing or quitting, so going back to the previous conversation we just had, we must be aware of what our body is saying to them. So being aware of our body building as well.
Right. So it's not just our internal reactions. Sometimes the way that we respond to the external stimuli is by little, things that we do with the eyes. Like I do this with my eyes, right? Or maybe we shake our heads. Maybe we turn away. Maybe we look down. Maybe we lash out. Maybe we use our hands and our arms. Maybe we raise our voice. Maybe it's even the tone of our voice. So reflecting on how you behave, as Marty reminds us, we should also think about what do our physical reactions look like. Think about people needing their space and their zone. If you are always seen as that person who overreacts, are people going to be able to come to you with a problem? Are they going to be able to trust you? Are they going to be able to work with you on resolving the conflict? Not likely. People will probably avoid you like the plague because they don't want to be around you. They're afraid of the way that you're going to behave. Now, the way we can start doing this is by learning to be proactive. I mentioned earlier that we can be intentional. So we can stop and ask ourselves, what do I want to get out of this? What is the end in mind? So being proactive means I look ahead and I ask myself, what am I trying to accomplish? By stopping yourself and having intent, it means that you're causing yourself to pause and to think, and rather than being impulsive, you're now taking the time to figure out what are the right steps for moving forward. You're looking with the end in mind, and you look at what you control, and most importantly, what you don't control. Let me ask people, how many times do we try to change external circumstances, people, the weather, whether it's snowing outside?
All the time.
All the time. Somebody speeds ahead of us in a 50 zone, they're going 70, and then they walk by us and they do a certain gesture with their hands, right? How does it make us feel? Right? So these are things that we don't control. We don't control what others do. We can't force others to change. We can't control the weather. We can't control certain things that happen at work. What we can control is our own ability to change and to respond differently to situations. You can control your reactions, but what you want to do is to change those reactions into responses. You want to start learning to become proactive. You choose the behavior, and that's what happens when you're proactive rather than reactive. You are now in control, and you get to choose how you behave, even to a negative situation. You become the person who calls the shots on how you behave. So I always use the example of a vampire. So Izabela, you know what a vampire is, right?
I do, yes.
Right? What happens when a vampire sucks our blood?
We may become a vampire too.
That's exactly it. Now, I don't think there are any real vampires out there, unless some of us believe in these theories. But there are a lot of people there that suck our energy. They suck our positivity. They take away our ability to be positive and focused and energetic and happy. And these people are always requiring us to give them of our energy and our positivity, and they suck away at it, just like a vampire sucks away at our blood, right? So if we continuously let people take advantage of us, victimize us, take away our ability to be in control of a situation, we are allowing them to turn us into vampires. So it's very important that you know that you're in control to choose how you behave differently with people. You can't change them. You can't tell a vampire that they can no longer be a vampire. We know it doesn't work, right? Just get him some garlic, right? But it doesn't work. Once a vampire, always a vampire. But you don't have to become a vampire. You can choose to behave differently. By becoming proactive, I like this word. Think about responsible. It has the actual response. You are able to respond. And you're not blaming things that are going around about, I look at my own family and sometimes I think, my dad used to do this. My dad got angry. My dad had a short fuse. So it's okay that I do this, right? Not. If I know that this is something that my father did, I'm aware of it, I can name it, I can stop myself and say, well, just because somebody else behaved in a certain way doesn't mean I have to repeat that. Doesn't mean that I don't have the ability to change it. Now, we know that DNA and genetics do impact us, but we have the ability to behave differently. And you've seen it often where, children will say to the parents, well, I'm not going to do that with my kids. And then with their parents, they do the same thing. It's a learned behavior. We will learn to continuously do the negative things that we see around us unless we are intentional and we are proactive on doing things different. We become responsible to say, no, I will not behave this way. I will start choosing my behavior. I will act rather than be acted upon. I will be the agent of change in my own life, and I can't force that on anybody else. A really great activity here is to list that trigger, list the stressor that you have. We go back to the challenge that we asked you about earlier, and to think about what are things that you control about that particular challenge. So you and a colleague, have a conflict. You don't agree. They believe that you should do the project one way. You believe it should be done another way. What do you control about that situation? I'm going to ask, what do we control about that example? What do we control? Share with us in the chat. I'd love to hear from you.
Thoughts.
What's that?
We control thoughts.
Our thoughts. Okay. What else?
The way we respond.
We control our actions, right? So we can choose if somebody's being confrontational, we can say to that person, you know what? I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to extract myself from the situation because it's not healthy for me right now. I need to go for a walk. I'm sitting down and somebody at work or somebody in my family triggers me. Oh, and I can tell you stories, but we only have 45 minutes today. I've learned in my personal life, I have a wonderful son that I love dearly. He is a lot like me. Part of it is learned behavior, part of it is genetics, but he's his own individual. What I've learned is that if I wanted to change our relationship and get along better with him, because like me, he's got a bit of a short fuse, I had to change. I didn't have to have the last word all the time. I started changing my physical position, my physical space, so that I could change my emotional and my mental state. So if I was sitting, I would get up and stand. If I was standing, I would sit. So try to change your physical state to change your emotional state. If you find that you're in an office and you're having a conversation and it's not making you comfortable, take permission to walk away and come back when you have calmed down. Let that person know that you are not in a safe space. Change your physical space to change your emotional or mental state. You can't expect other people to do that. I can't expect my son to change, but I can change how I behave with him. And the way that I start behaving differently will impact how my son is behaving. And I've seen it work. If we decide that we're always going to butt heads, nothing will change. So change has to start with you first. Now there's a video that we're going to watch here, but because the sound is not working, I will share the video in a chat later. Basically, how many of you are familiar with the 7 habits of highly effective people? Again, maybe in the chat, you can just share with us if you're familiar with Stephen Covey's wonderful book.
I see some yeses coming through.
So if you have not purchased the book, get it on Amazon. You've got some time to read. Take the time and read it. Get the Kindle version. Go online and Google 7 habits of highly effective people. The first habit is proactive for a reason, because proactive causes us to stop. It causes us to be intentional. It causes us to look ahead and to think, how can I respond rather than react? So let's bring it all together. By learning to respond rather than react, we start by identifying our triggers. What causes us to behave in a certain way? Is it a song? Is it a stimulus? Is it a bad situation? Is it a memory that is coming back to me? Right? So this is one way we can start thinking, how can I identify my trigger? Now, you can't change the way you behave unless you know the emotion that you are feeling. When you name it, you can change it. If you're feeling sad, dive deeper. Ask yourself, why am I feeling sad? What is causing me to feel sad? What is that trigger? Dig deeper. Keep asking yourself the question till you get to the bottom of the well and you find that answer. And then it's okay to not have all the answers at once, but keep asking till you find the answer so you can name that emotion. Without being able to name it, you cannot actually change it. You cannot reframe the situation unless you can reframe your response. Now we're getting up at about 1:40. We've got a few minutes left. I've got a couple slides and then I want to open it up for questions. But here's something that I'd like you to work on to increase your emotional intelligence and again, to help us manage our stress. Learn to respond rather than react. So this is what we've been saying all along. Pause, reflect, don't be impulsive, learn to journal. Challenge yourself every day to think about what worked today. What did I do that really, really worked? What can I improve about what I did today? What behaviors that I exhibit today that I should stop altogether? Journaling, even for 10 minutes, will help you with the reflection to get better and to create a habit. Learn to create a habit by being proactive and identifying your intention to yourself and to others. Let people know what it is that you want to accomplish. As mentioned, reflect on your actions. Get a journal, write it down. You'd be surprised what happens when you come back in 21 days and you look at what you wrote down on the first day. You'll say, did I really do that? We don't give ourselves credit. The things that cause us pain today, in 1 year, we don't even remember them. What we do remember is that we had a hard time, or we wasted time, or we let some good opportunities go, but we don't know why, because we let the little things become big things. We let the little pebbles become the boulders that we have to carry on our shoulders. When you can start naming those emotions that are causing you to feel so overwhelmed to carry that boulder, you can start putting it down bit by bit and being more proactive to reflect on what you're doing, to become more mindful, and to adapt to behavior and act differently. And that, of course, has to do with our moods and our emotional intelligence. By becoming more aware of how we behave, how we act, how we behave with others, this is what can help us become healthier and happier. And of course, look at your values. What values do you live by? Values are the things that govern how we get work done. If you're known as a person who's trustworthy, somebody who's honest, somebody who's transparent, when you behave differently, when you react differently, people will be forgiving because they realize maybe this is a one-off. When you start learning to respond and turn it into a habit, people will start to recognize you by the values that you embody. And of course, this is all about being consistent. You let those values become who you are. Be driven by, hopefully, positive and values that are not only positive, but they're good values. They're values that create a positive change to yourself and to others. So here's your takeaway today. I'm going to challenge you with the Good Habit Challenge. Start by identifying one negative reaction and how you would like to change by identifying the trigger. What is the proactive response? How can you do that differently? So now think about writing this down. Challenge yourself. Do I exhibit this behavior, this negative reaction on a daily basis? Whatever it is. No, we're not judging here, right? So there's no good or bad. It's only relative to how it makes you feel and how it makes the people around you feel. But ask yourself, do I do this daily? If you do, start observing over 21 days, how can I do this differently? Stop yourself each time that you're doing this and become intentional on reflecting and saying, I'm now going to respond rather than impulsively react. 10 days into it, see if you're making any progress. Is there someone that you trust? Is there a coworker? Is there a manager? Can you talk to your partner at home? Is there somebody who can hold up a mirror and give you honest feedback to help you grow and to help you recognize how you can do things better and differently? Now, they say a habit is formed after 21 days. Some say 40 days, but I'll tell you, once you form that habit, you can turn it into a positive lifestyle. And then it changes your life stance. You start looking at life through a different lens, one that is more positive, healthier, and happier. And all because you learn to manage the level of stress. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop here and ask if there's anything that you would like to ask. We've got about 3 more minutes for questions to open it up.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. That was a very powerful message. The first question just came through. What are your top tips for improving our emotional intelligence?
So the top tips is get to know yourself better. Ask yourself, who am I? Who do others see? You aren't your thoughts. You aren't what you wear. You aren't your job. We end up being what our actions are. People start recognizing us by the way we behave. So if you start looking at your behavior, changing your behavior so that it is more positive, people will start seeing you in a more positive light. Remember, emotional intelligence is being more self-aware, becoming more aware of others, and using that information to create better and stronger, more effective relationships with others.
Very good point. We're still waiting for more questions. And once we do that, if I can just share, especially going back to building daily habits, we have some other webinars coming up next week. A webinar is around mental health and why it really matters. So we'll talk about some tactics from mental health perspective. And a week later, our webinar series will be about actually building effective day from developing daily routine. So creating those habits right from the very first time when you wake up in the morning, right. Just to set the day at the right path. So,
and that is our intent. That is being intentional. That is being proactive. Do we get up and do we pull our social start going through our news feed, or do we get up and do some stretches, grab a cold glass of water, right? So what we do at the very beginning part of the day is the tone that it sets for the rest of the day. So intention and being proactive really helps. So that the person that asked about increasing our self-awareness, if you can't, identify that trigger, if you don't know what is causing you the pain or the angst, jump ahead a bit and think of, what can I start doing differently today? That positive reinforcement going forward will help you build on some of the things that are less positive, the more negative things in your past as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mohamed.
Thank you, everybody.
We don't have any other questions. My recommendation would be, I'll share the recording with everyone so you can access it at any other time. Now, I will reach out nicely to Mohamed to also share links to those 2 videos that we've missed during the presentation, because I feel they could be valued for everyone to watch as well. And if you have any other questions, any comments, feedback, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to help.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.